It was a Tuesday evening when I first started to feel the shift. As I sat in the living room, catching up on the news, I couldn't shake the odd feeling gnawing at the pit of my stomach. My wife, Amanda, was acting different. It wasn't drastic, no screaming arguments or closed-door secrets, but it was enough to leave a dull ache in my gut. She'd been working late more often, which seemed to coincide perfectly with the late-night meetings she insisted on going to, usually about projects at work. Funny, though, because whenever I asked her about them, the answers seemed just a bit too rehearsed. There was that one time I tried to ask her about her gym schedule. She used to go every couple of days, but now she was too tired to hit the gym. But, of course, she was back at the office until 9 every night. Something didn't add up. It all started innocently enough. I assumed she was busy, she worked in PR, after all. But slowly, I began noticing things. First, her phone. Now, I'm not one to invade privacy. I wasn't raised that way. But there was that one time I walked into the kitchen and saw her phone just sitting there on the counter, screen face up. She'd always been careful with it. Too careful. I don't know what came over me, but curiosity got the better of me. I casually glanced at the phone, as if I was just checking the time. What I saw froze me. There it was, an unfamiliar number. And the texts were far too friendly for my liking. Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. Babe? I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. The words echoed in my head as I scrolled further. More of the same. Compliments. Inside jokes. The kind of things you say to someone who means more than just a coworker. The worst part? She hadn't deleted them. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a colleague. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But deep down, I knew. My heart sank, and my stomach twisted. I couldn't ignore it. I had to find out the truth. So, I started watching. Watching her habits. Her odd, late-night trips to the office. The gym visits that were a little too frequent. I even followed her once, pretending to leave for work early. I was ready for whatever I might find, though I didn't want to believe it. That night, I decided to take action. I followed her to a restaurant. I didn't plan on confronting her, no, but I had to know. And there they were, Amanda and the same guy from the messages. He was tall, dark hair, a bit too well-groomed for my liking. They were sitting at a table near the back, close enough for me to see but far enough to stay out of sight. They were laughing, no, giggling, like they were in their own world. I saw them lean in, share a drink, and then, without warning, he kissed her on the cheek. It was a brief kiss, but it was enough to confirm what I had feared. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't just some casual flirtation. This was something real. Something far deeper than I had imagined. It felt like a slap to the face. My heart raced in my chest as I turned away, hiding my own face from view. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was the truth staring me in the face. I had to keep calm. I couldn't just storm in there and start yelling, though the anger was bubbling up inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. I had to be smart. I needed more proof. After they left the restaurant, I made a note of the address of the place they'd gone to, the time they left. I had to stay composed. Tomorrow, I'd find out everything. I wasn't going to confront her just yet. I had to be sure. The next few days felt like an eternity. I had to play my cards carefully. I couldn't just march up to Amanda and accuse her of something without solid proof. After the dinner I witnessed, I knew I had to be methodical. My mind was a storm of questions, but there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide without knowing the full truth. So, I began to follow her. At first, I simply shadowed her route to work. I drove behind her car, staying a safe distance back, trying to keep my suspicions hidden beneath a mask of normalcy. My gut twisted every time she made a turn that I knew wasn't part of her usual routine. She hadn't changed her schedule this much in years. The doubt started creeping in. I began wondering if I had missed something, if I had ignored the signs all along. But the real breakthrough came a few days later when I decided to follow her after work. I had noticed she was coming home later and later, and it had been bothering me for weeks. On this particular evening, I trailed behind her car, keeping a safe distance, just as I had done before. I didn't know where she was going, but I knew it wasn't the office this time. She turned down a narrow side street and pulled into a parking lot. My heart sank, but I forced myself to remain calm as I parked across the street, pretending to just be passing through. There, in front of me, was the same man I had seen her with at the restaurant, walking toward her car with a huge grin on his face. I felt a lump in my throat as I watched them greet each other with an embrace that lingered just a second too long. I couldn't make out every word, but I didn't need to hear them to know the bond between them was real. It wasn't a casual friendship. It wasn't a colleague or a business partner. It was something more, something far more personal than I had ever wanted to believe. I tried to stay out of sight, but my mind was spinning. They walked to a nearby restaurant, talking and laughing as if they had all the time in the world. I followed them from a distance, keeping my cool while everything inside me was screaming. I watched them sit down at a table in the corner, sharing a meal, their chemistry undeniable. They leaned in close, whispering in each other's ears, making each other laugh. It was like they were completely lost in their own world, oblivious to the rest of the world around them. That was the moment I realized that this wasn't just a brief affair or a passing fling. This was something deeper, something that had been growing for a while. The way they interacted was intimate, easy, and natural. It made me feel like a stranger in my own home. I couldn't take it anymore. I had seen enough. But I had to be sure. I needed more than just suspicion. I needed to confront her with undeniable proof. I left the restaurant without them noticing, my heart pounding, but my mind working overtime. The next day, I decided to dig a little deeper. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to come clean. I had to find out everything. I waited until she was at work, then went to the one place I knew would have answers, the gym. Amanda had started going regularly a few months ago, something that had never been part of her routine before. I had never paid much attention, thinking it was just her trying to get fit or de-stress from work, but now I wondered if it was more about seeing someone else. As I walked into the gym, I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. I wasn't doing this to punish her. I was doing this because I needed answers. I needed to know the truth. I spent the next hour hanging around the entrance, pretending to stretch and adjust my gym bag while I waited for her to leave. When she finally emerged, I followed at a distance, keeping my cool. She didn't notice me at first, too busy talking to someone else in the parking lot. But when I caught up, I saw her talking to the same guy. This time, there was no mistaking it. He was kissing her on the cheek, and they lingered a little too long, smiling at each other like they were the only two people in the world. It was like I wasn't even there, and the sting of it all was unbearable. I could feel my temper bubbling up, but I held it in. I needed to stay calm. I had to know the whole story before I confronted her. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? How much had I missed? I couldn't stand the thought of her betraying me, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore what I had seen with my own eyes. I had to gather the final piece of the puzzle. I watched them get into his car and drive off together, my stomach churning as I stood there in the parking lot. The silence was deafening, and my heart felt heavy. This wasn't just some one-off mistake. This was a full-blown affair. I had the proof I needed. By the time I got home, I was on edge. My emotions were all over the place, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this go. I couldn't. It wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about finding out what was really happening. When Amanda came home that night, I was ready. I was calm on the outside, but inside, I was a tornado. She walked in, looking just the same as always, and for a second, I thought maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then, I looked at her, and the words came out without warning. "I know what's going on, Amanda." The words felt like a punch in the stomach as I spoke them aloud. She froze, her eyes wide with surprise. I could see the guilt flash across her face before she quickly masked it with a weak smile. What do you mean?" she stammered, clearly caught off guard. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I had already seen the truth, and now I needed to hear it from her mouth. The air in the living room felt thick as I stood there, watching Amanda's eyes dart around, searching for an escape, anything that might help her wriggle out of this conversation. I could see the nervousness in her posture, the slight tremor in her hands, but there was no way I was going to let her off the hook this time. I had seen enough, far too much, actually, and I needed answers. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make any accusations yet. I just stood there, staring at her, waiting for her to speak. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I had to stay calm. I couldn't let her turn this around on me. "I know what's been going on, Amanda," I repeated, my voice steady but thick with emotion. "I know about him. About the dinners. The messages. Everything." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she didn't say a word. She just stood there, her eyes wide with panic, as if she was trying to piece together what exactly I knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," she finally said, her voice trembling as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable. I could tell that her instinct was to deny everything, but there was no way she could talk her way out of this. I wasn't buying it anymore. "Don't lie to me," I shot back, feeling the anger rise despite myself. "I've seen everything, every text, every moment." You've been with him, haven't you? All those late nights. Those work meetings, they weren't about work at all, were they? I took a step closer, and she backed away slightly, avoiding my eyes. The guilt was practically radiating off of her, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't wrong. I had seen the truth, and now she had no choice but to face it. She opened her mouth, probably to say something more, but the words seemed to get stuck in her throat. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't care about that anymore. I was too far gone, too hurt, too angry. This wasn't the woman I had married. The woman I married wouldn't have hidden something like this from me. The woman I had trusted wouldn't have kept something so huge a secret, lying to my face every time I asked about her day or her plans. As much as I had hoped it wasn't true, I had to face the reality that Amanda had betrayed me, and there was no easy way out of it. After what felt like an eternity of silence, she finally spoke again, but this time, her voice wasn't filled with excuses or defenses. It was calm, resigned. "It's not what you think, Henry," she said softly, her gaze finally meeting mine. "I know it looks bad, but I swear, it's not what you think. John, he's not who you think he is. John." The man who had shown up in so many of her messages, the man I had seen her with, laughing and sharing intimate moments. My mind was racing as I tried to process her words. She wasn't denying it, not really. She was just spinning it into something else. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "He's not. I mean, he's not my boyfriend or anything like that. We're not having an affair. I swear. He's my brother, Henry." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My brain couldn't process what she was saying. Her brother? I didn't even know she had a brother, let alone one she was so close to. But then, I saw the way her eyes softened when she said his name, and it made sense in a way. There was something in her voice, a tenderness, a vulnerability, that suggested a deep connection, a bond one hadn't known existed. She took a deep breath before continuing, her voice more confident now, more certain. "I haven't seen him in years," she explained. "There was a falling out with our family. A stupid argument that I should have resolved years ago, but I didn't. And I just couldn't stand to lose him completely. He's been sick, Henry. Really sick. And I've been trying to help him get better. I didn't want to tell you, because I didn't want you to feel like I was keeping secrets, but I was scared you'd never understand. So I didn't say anything. I stood there, completely stunned. I had no idea what to say. My mind was still trying to catch up with what she was saying. A brother? Sick? I had never heard about this. How could she have kept something like this from me? I felt betrayed in a way I couldn't even put into words. She had been hiding this huge part of her life from me, and I had no idea why. Was it out of shame? Or was it just because she thought I wouldn't care? I felt a strange mix of guilt and confusion as I processed her explanation. I wanted to believe her, but everything about this felt so out of place. "Why didn't you tell me about him before?" I finally asked, my voice softer now, but still full of disbelief. She looked down, almost ashamed, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. "I didn't want you to think I was trying to hide something," she said quietly. "I wanted to tell you. I really did, but it was just easier not to. He's been through a lot, Henry, and I wanted to be there for him. But I swear, that's all it is. I didn't mean for it to look the way it does." I took a deep breath, trying to make sense of everything. My emotions were a whirlwind, and I couldn't tell if I was relieved or just more confused. I had seen them together. I had watched them interact like a couple. But if what she was saying was true, then I had completely misunderstood everything. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" I asked, the doubt creeping into my voice despite myself. She didn't flinch. She just met my gaze, steady and calm. "I'll prove it to you, Henry. I'll take you to see him. I'll show you everything. He's been in and out of the hospital for the past few months. He's not some guy I'm hiding from you. He's my brother, and I've been trying to take care of him." I couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that lingered in the air after Amanda's confession. My mind raced, turning her words over and over again, trying to piece everything together. A brother? I had never once heard about this brother. And yet, she seemed so sure of herself. She was calm now, almost too calm, and that only made me more suspicious. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her, to just take her word for it and move on, but the nagging doubts wouldn't let up. The way I had seen them together, laughing, so at ease with each other, just didn't seem to fit with what she was telling me. Something didn't add up, and I couldn't let it go without more proof. So, I made a decision. I wasn't going to take her word for it. I needed to see this for myself. I told Amanda that I would go with her to meet her brother. She seemed a bit relieved that I had agreed to give her side of the story a chance. She made a phone call to arrange a meeting with John, and the next afternoon, we were on our way. I kept my distance, staying quiet for most of the drive, letting my mind wander. My gut told me I was walking into something bigger than I had bargained for, but part of me, just a small part, wanted to believe Amanda. I wanted to believe that everything I had seen, all the pieces I thought I had figured out, were just the result of my own paranoia. Maybe I had been too quick to judge. Maybe Amanda was telling the truth, and I had let my suspicions cloud my judgment. When we arrived at the hospital, Amanda led me through the doors, down long hallways that smelled like antiseptic and faintly of bleach. My eyes scanned the surroundings, looking for any signs of the brother she had described. Amanda seemed comfortable here, moving with purpose as if she had spent a lot of time in this place. She wasn't the same woman I had known, the one who had always been so private, so reserved about her past. But here, she was different. She was focused, her eyes bright with the kind of urgency that only came from caring about someone deeply. The moment we stepped into the room where John was staying, my breath caught in my throat. He was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to IVs and machines, his face pale and drawn, looking far older than I had expected. I could see the weariness in his eyes, the exhaustion that came from fighting something far beyond his control. For a moment, I stood there frozen, unsure of what to think. This wasn't some stranger she was hiding. This was real. This was her brother, and everything about him seemed to confirm that. He didn't look like a man playing a part. He looked like someone who had been through a lot, someone who needed help. I watched Amanda walk over to him, her face softening as she touched his hand gently. He smiled weakly, clearly grateful for her presence. It wasn't the kind of smile you give a lover. It was the kind you give a sibling, a family member. And just like that, I could feel the truth of her words start to seep in. "Henry, this is John," Amanda said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "John, this is my husband, Henry. I know this probably looks strange, but I want you to understand. I never wanted to keep this from you. I didn't know how to explain everything without it looking like I was hiding something from you." I stood there, watching as they interacted, comfortably, familiarly. The way John looked at her wasn't like someone involved in an affair. It was the look of a brother who had been through hell and was finally getting the support he needed. "Hey, Henry," John said, his voice weak but warm. "I'm sorry for all the confusion. I didn't mean to make things complicated. It's just, well, it's been a tough time for me. Amanda has been helping me through it all, and I didn't want to cause any problems between you two. She's been my lifeline, man." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had no idea what kind of illness he had been battling, but the way he spoke about Amanda, about her role in his life, made it clear that he wasn't just a random guy. He was her family, and she was there for him in ways I hadn't known. I stood there, lost in the weight of the moment. I could feel the guilt start to settle in, the sting of my own hasty judgments. My mind had been so focused on finding the evidence I needed to prove her wrong, to validate my suspicions, that I hadn't stopped to consider the possibility that I had been wrong all along. I had misread the situation. I had jumped to conclusions without knowing the full story. I had let my doubts get the best of me, and now I was standing in front of the man I had assumed was the source of my pain. The reality of the situation hit me all at once. I had misunderstood everything. Amanda looked at me, her eyes full of worry, but there was a small glimmer of hope in them. I could tell she was afraid of how I would react. I had just accused her of betraying me, of lying to me, and here she was, showing me the truth. I was still reeling from the shock, but I had to admit that I owed her an apology. I had let my emotions cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I had almost lost something I didn't even realize I had. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I should have trusted you. I should have listened to you from the start. I was wrong." Amanda's face softened, and she stepped closer to me, her hand resting on my arm. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I understand why you were suspicious. But you have to believe me, Henry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I nodded, still processing everything. This wasn't the story I had expected. This wasn't the betrayal I had thought it was. And as much as it stung to admit it, I realized that I had let my own insecurities take control of the situation. I had created a story in my mind based on what I thought I knew. and I hadn't bothered to ask the right questions until it was almost too late. The days that followed felt like a blur, a slow unraveling of everything I had believed about my marriage. There were no dramatic confrontations or fiery arguments, but there was an overwhelming sense of tension that hung in the air between Amanda and me. As much as I wanted to move past the confusion, to simply believe her and let it all go, the damage had already been done. The foundation of our relationship had been cracked, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I could feel the weight of my own mistakes pressing down on me. I had accused her without knowing the full truth, and now I had to live with the consequences of my rash judgments. I had doubted her, questioned her, and in doing so, I had betrayed her trust. Amanda had been patient with me. She never once demanded an apology or asked me to explain myself. She simply gave me space, allowed me to process everything, and waited for me to come to terms with what had happened. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but she didn't say much about it. She didn't need to. I had seen the pain in her face when I first confronted her, when she thought I might walk out of her life forever. I could feel the regret in her every movement, the weight of my doubts hanging over us. I knew she had been honest with me, but I couldn't deny that something had shifted between us. Trust wasn't something that could just be rebuilt overnight. The hardest part was knowing that I had let my suspicions dictate my actions. I had turned a blind eye to the love and care she had shown for her brother, choosing instead to focus on my own fears and insecurities. Amanda had never given me a reason to doubt her loyalty, but in my mind, the doubts had taken root, and they had grown into something far worse than the reality. I had been so consumed by my own emotions, so convinced that I was right, that I hadn't considered the possibility that I was wrong. And now, I had to face the fact that I had almost lost everything over a misunderstanding. One evening, after dinner, Amanda and I sat down together, the silence between us stretching for what felt like hours. It wasn't uncomfortable, exactly, but it was filled with a kind of unspoken tension that neither of us knew how to break. I stared at the empty space between us, trying to figure out what to say. There were so many things I needed to apologize for, so many things I had to explain, but I didn't know where to start. Finally, Amanda spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I know it's been hard, Henry. I know you're still processing everything, and I understand. But we need to talk about where we go from here. I'm not asking for things to be perfect overnight. I just want us to be able to move forward, together." Her words struck a chord deep within me. She wasn't angry, she wasn't accusing me of anything, but there was a quiet strength in her voice, a resilience that I couldn't help but admire. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was simply trying to figure out how to move forward, just as I was. But I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Rebuilding trust after everything that had happened was going to take time. And for the first time in a long while, I found myself wondering if I was truly capable of doing that. Could I let go of my doubts? Could I truly forgive myself for doubting her? We spent the next few weeks trying to reconnect, to rebuild the pieces of our relationship that had been broken. It wasn't easy. There were moments of silence, moments when I caught myself pulling away from her, still unsure of how to navigate the space between us. But little by little, we started talking again. We shared our frustrations, our fears, and slowly, I began to see the woman I had married, the woman I had once trusted with everything. It wasn't that I had stopped loving her. I had never stopped loving her. But the trust that had once been so solid between us had cracked, and it was going to take time to repair. Amanda never pushed me to get over it quickly. She didn't expect me to just forgive myself and move on. She gave me the space I needed, and in return, I started doing the same for her. I listened when she talked about her brother, about the pain he had been going through, and I started to understand her side of things. She had been doing what she thought was best for him, and I had been too caught up in my own insecurities to see that. I realized that I had been wrong to make assumptions without knowing the full picture. And while I couldn't undo the past, I could do better in the future. We never had a grand declaration of reconciliation. There were no big gestures, no dramatic moments. But there was a quiet understanding between us, an unspoken agreement that we were both willing to work through this, together. We didn't need to pretend that everything was fine. It wasn't. But we were willing to face the mess together, to clean up the pieces and rebuild something stronger. I knew that I still had a lot of work to do, both in mending my relationship with Amanda and in learning to trust her again. But this time, I was determined to get it right. I realized that, sometimes, things aren't as simple as they seem. Our minds can trick us into believing something that isn't true, and our insecurities can drive us to make decisions that we regret. But the key to moving forward is not in pretending that everything is perfect, but in acknowledging the mistakes we've made, learning from them, and finding a way to rebuild. Amanda and I still had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. We had made it through the hardest part, and now we could focus on healing. Together,